that humans will have to wholly reinvent themselves every 10 years, learning new job skills that will eventually become antiquated or transferred to machines. So our children and their children are going to have to do the same. So I think we're all going to have to develop some new skills and superpowers, and we're here to talk about that today. So I've got some great seasoned leaders here. I'm going to ask each of them to quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll get right into the panel. So Gav, you want to start us off?
Oh, sure. So I'm Gavriella Schuster, and I have been with the Women in Cloud for a long time. I spent almost 26 years at Microsoft and have been spending the last year and a half working with a number of organizations and really focusing on allyship and DEI.
Great. Thanks, Gavriella. So glad to have you here. Gina, why don't you introduce yourself next?
Good afternoon, all. I'm Gina Fratarcangeli. I am currently a managing director with Google, and I am working on their global strategic partnerships and large opportunities. Having a blast doing that, and I'm on the board of Women in Cloud.
Very good. And Gretchen, last but certainly not least, your turn.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Gretchen O'Hara. I'm also one of the original co-founders of Women in Cloud and on the board, strong advocate, certainly for women diversity in technology all up. I also sit on the board of a company called IdeaGen, focusing on United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is tied in to all of the amazing work that we're doing here. And I'm the channel chief at Splunk, which is a cybersecurity company that manages some of the top logos around the world. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. One of the ways these macro trends and uncertainties are impacting us, many of us in the tech sector, is, sort of this daily wake-up call we get that another company is going through layoffs. So, Gina, I'm going to start with you. Have you ever been laid off? And if so, how did you handle it? And if you're waiting for that other shoe to drop and trying to prepare yourself, what are some of the things you would recommend to put people in a really good position as we all kind of face this uncertainty?
Sure. Yes, I have been laid off, and it hurts. And no matter how much people tell you to not take it personally, for anyone going through that right now, I absolutely feel your pain. It is impossible to not take it personally. I'll anecdotally share the first time I was laid off. I was on the way to go sign a deal, and my boss at the time, who had only been there 2 months, told me to pull over in the car. I'm like, I got to get to the client. He's like, just pull over. I'm like, okay. And he laid me off right there. I hadn't even met my boss in person before. I was literally on the way to go close a deal. And I was pissed. So what I learned from that, though, was that he didn't know me. And when the cards are down and things are moving and piece parts are moving, they're looking at variables, sometimes yes, sometimes no, and making decisions. And a lot of times it's a judgment call by them, and they're making relationship-based decisions. So what I learned from that process was that I was never again going to get laid off by someone who didn't know me, and with intention went out and made sure that in every organization that I was with, I built a strong network of people who knew me and knew what I was doing, and made sure that I had relationships in and around my chain of command. So if something did happen like that, I had other places to land, and making sure that my network of friends and influencers was wide, and making sure that not just my manager, not just my manager's manager, but if you're in a situation where there's multiple layers, that the people up the food chain know who you are and know what you do, and know that you care about your job and you're committed to it. I know, and I coach and mentor so many young women who are nervous about reaching out and building those relationships, and for promotions, and in this environment, preventing yourself from getting laid off, having them have a name with a face, and know, not just a name with a face, but an experience set with a name, so that as they're looking at that, they say, oh yeah, person X, I'm going to hold on to because I've met that person and I see the potential in that person. Now, there's going to be times that regardless of that, there's nothing you can do in that space, and it's going to happen to you. And that's where having that network inside your organization as well as outside of your organization is so critical. Taking the calls from recruiters, whether you want a job or not, on an ongoing basis, being willing to have those conversations, so critical, so that they know who you are, so that, again, you've built your network as wide as you can, are just a couple of the tips I've used. Team, what, any other thoughts you want to pile on there, gang?
Well, I'll go ahead, Gav.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I've been through that on both sides of the aisle. I have been laid off. I have had to go through, the hard, sort of decisions of what that is. And a lot of times it really comes down to just business decisions based on investments of where and how the company is, not necessarily about really who any of those people are. And regardless, it hurts, it stings. It's kind of just a very hard and humbling feeling. And I think the learnings on both sides of the aisle is reach out. A lot of times people don't want to talk about that, or, they're trying to, just basically go it alone. And when you actually open yourself up to that, you would be amazed that pretty much everyone has a shared lived experience that is very similar. And there's no one that isn't willing to do something in some way to connect you somewhere. So I think for me, the big thing is, one, you can't take it personally. Being on the side of having to run layoffs of teams, 99% of the time, it is actually not personal at all. So you can't take it as personal. Don't have it take away from your self-value. Don't have it impact your confidence of who you are and the value you bring to any organization. And really then reach out, because it's an incredible network. And the people that reach out to me, I will always help anyone that reaches out. So when it happens to you, just know you've done that for people. People will do it for you. So the transparency there, I think, is an important one as well.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gretchen.
Yeah. And I guess what I would say, echoing both what Gina and Gretchen said, great sage advice. I would just add that, in times of financial crisis, which is really where we are, right? You should be on the lookout for signs, because the best way to work through layoffs, whether it's your own or your teams or people that you know, is to be ready for it, right? So, look for the signs within your organization about where is the value going, where are the investments going, what's hitting the bottom line, and start preparing, start, building out. I know that a number of people have recently been laid off, have contacted me. But they contacted me probably 2 or 3 months ago, because they saw the signs. Mm-hmm. And they said, now what do I do? Like, do I just wait? And I'm like, no, you're seeing the signs. So here's how you should start, building your roadmap and figuring out what's next and where you want to go and how you want to deal with this, right? Because then it makes it a lot less scary if you can start doing that while you do still have a job and you do still have income coming in.
It's such a good point. I just want to add to this. I think personally, I, for so many 20 plus years, was like, my value will be seen. I'm super loyal. I won't answer that recruiter call. That can't happen to me. And I got so spot on. It's like, you have to sort of get past that and recognize that you have to take control of your career. And if anything, it just broadens your network. So 100% Gav on that. I've made those mistakes. I have been the ones that have been like, oh, no, you're going to see my worth. You're going to see my value. I'm contributing. And, there's just a reality piece that I think is super important, which is to stay networked, take those recruiting calls. And even if it's just to add value to them, to others, when it comes back around, now you have that network. So
yeah, that's great. So let's maybe switch gears a little bit and talk about, okay, so you've all talked about looking for the signs within your organization, but what about macro trends outside the organization? Like, can you all talk a little bit about maybe where you look for information, what you look at, the things that you're looking at to sort of build that future career roadmap? Gavriella, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, so, I really look at, what do I think, where do I think the money's going, right? So, what are the things that are going to make the difference in the economy? And so, for me, one of the biggest trends right now is around supply chain. Supply chain is changing. We have learned a lot from the mistakes of the supply chain over the last 2 years. And so organizations are all very focused on that. So if you can insert yourself in being a problem solver and an innovator on the supply chain, that will make a huge difference. Thinking about then what would make a difference in that, we've got a lot of digital transformation, digitization of work going on, and so that brings up things like security is a big issue. Huge issue, actually, and then how the transfer of data is happening, not only from a security standpoint, but then in terms of what are you going to do with it? How do you turn that data into insights through ML and AI? And then, I also think that there's a big shift happening around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, thinking about your own leadership style, your own engagement style, and how are you going to be part of a solution in creating a more inclusive environment wherever you go? And how do you bring that back into the narrative that you tell about yourself?
Great. Gretchen, what about you? Anything else that you're kind of keeping your eye on?
Yeah, I mean, I think Gav did a nice summary of the technology, right? You have to follow where those things lie, and I think she did a good outline of that. When you follow the money, and I think several of us have been through economic tough times and recessions, throughout historically of the last 30 years, and there's a couple things that I think are really important to think about. Where and what is the impact of IT, what's happening there in times of uncertain times. IT shifts. It becomes a cost savings discussion. It becomes, how can I do more with less? It talks about what are the technologies I need to bet on that are going to actually help save me money or create that differentiation, as opposed to sometimes a lot of those other technologies that focus more on the growth side. And so when you think about that, then it's like big data has a big play, cybersecurity and the risk of a company, absolutely huge. And then improvements on AI becomes a huge bet. I think if you're reading anything coming out of World Economic Forum or Davos, and you can sort of read up on that. But there will be technologies that will seem innovative in supply chain, as digital work, right, as Gav mentioned, but it's in the lens of helping improve and save money in a time when things are very tight. So for me, those economic pressures and looking at the global economy are things that I sort of look at, and then I try and pick and prioritize on the things that are going to be the big bets during that time, because you're relevant, you'll stay connected, and it certainly builds your skill set essentially to help you be resilient in this market. And the last thing I'll just say is, not everyone has AI skills, not everyone has a background in big data, all of that, of course, to be sure, but you all have incredible skill and talent in what you can bring. Join meetups, join advisory boards, join places where you can bring your skill into some of these other areas. And that also will help skill you up and keep you relevant in a very uncertain time.
Gretchen, so many amazing points in that. Just awesome. And it just got me thinking on a million fronts. And I always tell people, always look for what's emerging and be thinking about that and invest in yourself and the education side. But what Gretchen said there was super critical. No one expects you to be the expert on everything. In fact, you're super annoying if you act like the expert on everything. But understanding where the technology is going and what is emerging and how those changes in technology are going to influence and impact your current job, your clients, your potential role, that is what your job is to do. So, in my realm, I spent a ton of time in the last 12, 24 months getting really into the metaverse and all the power that it's going to deliver. And I don't I still feel incredibly strong about that. But tying back to what Gabby said, follow the money. And right now, as we head into a downturn economy, I won't say aspects of the metaverse are a luxury, but they're a little bit of a luxury. And the focus of leaders is pivoting from how do I transform my business to how do I use transformation to reduce the cost of my operating model. So in that scenario, looking at technologies like AI that can drive such huge impacts to your business and reduction in your cost. So if people ask me, where should I be focusing my energy and looking, it is in that AI space and machine learning and how that is going to impact whatever is going to impact every aspect, supply chain, operation. It is going to impact everything, because now with, all the different stuff and generative AI, it is going to become ubiquitous and easy to do and easy to utilize. And people who aren't coders and programmers are going to be able to leverage AI in ways that they haven't before in a really seamless way to drive transformation, but also very importantly, reduce costs. So if I were to give you any advice, it is learn about AI, learn about how it's going to impact your business, and be a thought leader in that space to be challenging your business, how you can start thinking about operating more efficiently using AI.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll just sort of add one more point that's a non-technology point. For everyone who's building your business, starting your business right now, all the entrepreneurs that are thinking about things, I had my first business in the dot bust. I mean, that was an incredible learning experience. But what you can do is think about profitable growth. And so there's the technology side you want to bet on. There's the follow the money side you want to bet on. And then just in terms of, as you think about your own business plan and your own sort of company that you're continuing to grow in uncertain times, how do you shift to that profitability message and sort of where and how you place your bets on that profitability growth? That's where the VCs are looking. That's certainly where the street is looking. That's where the money is going. And so that would be a business recommendation as well as you're thinking through strategies of your 1, 2, 3 year plans.
Great. Well, this has all been great. Let's maybe turn all of this awareness and sort of trends into action. So, as we think about where people are today and this notion that I shared at the beginning about in 10 years' time, everyone will have to continually reinvent themselves. I'd love for each of you to weigh in on what are some of the things that you do and have done to build that resilience in your career, to always be looking ahead, practical things like actual actionable things that people should be thinking about doing. So who wants to start? Gavriella?
Sure, I can start. So I've probably reinvented myself like 15 times. And so, what I would say is, it is about being a student of life, right? So continuously staying curious, signing up for classes where you're like, I'm not sure if I really, when I would use this, but it's interesting to me, right? And then looking at, again, what are the trends? What are the things that are happening? And they may have nothing to do with what you're currently doing, but you think, well, that seems like a place where a lot of investment is going. So I should learn more about that. And then you just find all the breadcrumbs that lead you to ways you can learn about that. You can find influencers on LinkedIn who you can start to follow and listen to and watch. You can read books about it. You can watch the webinars, and and then you start to comment and post and put your own ideas out there and get other people to, you ask them, what's your opinion? And you create community around some of these things. You will learn more. So it just helps you to continue to push yourself on that journey of learning. And then it's about networking. Right? So reaching out to people person to person and actually spending some time learning from them, understanding their path. How did they get where they are? Letting them know that's something you're interested in. you would be amazed at how many people will just pull you into conversations or even organizations when they know that you're interested in a topic area, in doing something different, and just expanding that. And, and then I'd also say, whenever you feel comfortable in your job, that's the time to start doing that. That's the time to start looking for something else to do and pushing yourself.
Very good. Gretchen, how about you? What advice do you have?
I'm like Gav's pretty much, I would say, I ditto all of that. I think you have to have that, growth mindset, that learner mentality. I'll just add 2 more things. It's okay to be vulnerable and know what you don't know. And I think the more you can be like, and if someone was in the chat saying, I didn't know this 2 years and I learned, I reinvent myself every time. I'm like the first person, I'm like, I don't know this, but I'm going to sign up for sustainability. I don't know this. I'm going to, sign up to, work in cybersecurity. I think it's okay to bring the best of what you have and be vulnerable on the things that you need to learn. And I think that's okay. I think the second thing that I've used like a practical tip, I think it's been really challenging in COVID. Like the days of, hey, I'm going to meet for coffee, or I'm going to hook up, or I'm going to shadow you here. Like those are gone. I mean, it's hard. So how do you get that connection, right? In terms of that, mentorship and other places where you can learn. And so I've been monitoring the chat, some amazing feedback there. That's where I think you do need to join some of these coalitions. You need to be on the WICxSummit to learn and connect. I think where you can shadow and just say, hey, can I join and sort of listen in? Those are the things that I think I've done to just help with my learning beyond the LinkedIn and the reading and all of the sort of, I would say the hard skill set. It's like, how do you build relationships in a virtual world? It's these types of forums that I would always prioritize and commit. And that will really help you sort of be, I would say, resilient in sort of where and how things move next.
Yeah. And you've covered everything. A few things to add. Curator of content, I think, is really important. Be that person in your community, and you're going to ebb and flow on your journey, but start creating yourself and the image of yourself as a curator of content. Share information. It's amazing how many people react to the articles. Spend the time and do it. And then the other thing is network like it's your job, because it is your job. It should be a part of your job. And yes, a lot of times it's pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, but make it happen and allocate time on your calendar. This is the advice I give ever. Allocate Friday from 1 to 5. That's when you're going to go out and meet someone for coffee. That's when you're going to brush your hair and and put on makeup and actually get out of your sweatpants and get out of your home office and go meet people for coffee. But network like it's your job, because over my 30-year career at this point, it is your job, and those relationships are so important. And as we come out of the COVID, like Gretchen said, reestablishing that human connection is so important. Everyone wants it, and we're all human, and we're all here to help each other. So that's.
Well, ladies, this has been an amazingly wonderful panel. I think we've shared a lot of wonderful ideas and advice for all of the people attending today. And so I just want to thank all of you.